Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development Interview Series. My name is Michael Clark. I'm the host of the podcast, and I'm joined today by my good friend, George Symeonidis. George, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mike. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, no, this is great. So just because I think a lot of people probably don't know who you are, I wanted to give a brief introduction and give your bio for people so they know a little bit about you as we get into our discussion today. So for those that don't know George, George is a certified actuary. He's got a PhD in economics. He's a board member with the Hellenic Actuarial Authority, which provides funds and the ministry with advice on reforms and the viability of the pension system in Greece. He works with international organizations in order to provide technical assistance to the Greek government, both hands-on technical work and oversight. So in addition to his work there with the Greek government, he's also a visiting professor at the University of, I'm going to butcher the name here, you're going to have to help me, Piraeus?
Yes,
All right,
Piraeus.
Piraeus. All right, in Greece, the University of the Aegean and the Hellenic Open University. He's also the current chair of the International Association of Consulting Actuaries, which is one of the sections under the International Actuarial Association. And he sits on the IAA's Strategic Planning Committee. He's a member there. So George and I actually know each other from IACA, from the International Association of Consulting Actuaries, where we've both been board members for a number of years. And as I mentioned, George is the current chair. So we've got to work together quite a bit there. Some other interesting.
And you're serving as a very, very good executive.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I took on that executive director role almost a year ago now. It's crazy to think that when George assumed the chairship for the organization. Some other interesting things about George: he was raised bilingual because his parents had moved to Egypt during World War II. Got strong ties to English speaking and Portuguese speaking countries. Okay, so you're raised bilingual. One of those is Greek.
Greek, yeah.
But if you grew up in Egypt, was it English? Was it
No, it
Arabic?
was English, actually. It was English.
Okay.
It should have been Portuguese as well, but I missed that somewhere along the way.
So very multi-talented when it comes to languages. In addition, he I'm again you're gonna have to help me with the pronunciation. Tang Soo Do.
Yes,
All
very
right,
good.
which is Korean karate. He's an instructor. He's been training since he was a teenager. His son is now into it. And actually, back in May of 2024, when the IAA had meetings in Seoul, he was actually able to visit the Korean master of that particular discipline. So that must have been a cool experience.
Yeah, it was something else. It was like something you might be thinking of your whole life, especially when it's the 90s and you're training in a dojo in a small suburb of Athens. And then you know that there's someone in Korea training with at the same time, and you might to get to know them one day, and then one day you really get to know them. And it's like it was extraordinary for me.
Mhm. That's awesome. In addition to all of his professional endeavors, George also strives to have a good work-life balance. He's actually the chair of the Parent-Teacher Association for his son's school, gets involved there, I think the way to put it maybe is to try to challenge maybe stereotypes about men, especially, and being involved. So trying to make a difference there. And so that's great. So George, I want to start. A lot of our audience for this podcast tends to be U.S. or North American based. I think they'd be really interested to know, you being in Greece, how did you become an actuary? How did you come across the profession? Let's start there.
Well, it was, some things happen just because they're meant to, and there's also a great deal of things happening along the way that bring you close to that. What I mean to say is that this position has a lot to do with the profession we all choose, right? So I always had a thing for being precise and liking numbers and liking to talk exactly about things as they are. So as I grew older, I realized that like mathematics very much. But back in the day when I entered university, there was no actual actuarial department in Greece. And the founding father of the Greek, the Hellenic Association here in Greece, he was actually he had been to the U.S. before. So in Greece, when the profession started, there weren't even any exams. So people would have the association and they would gather together. They would say, "I know how to, perform these actuarial tasks." They would sign a paper that said that they do, and they would just be qualified. And that was it.
That was it. That's a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
easier than what maybe a lot of our listeners have
Pretty
gone through
much.
with their
Exactly.
credentialing examinations for sure.
Exactly, exactly. But as I went into university, I took my math degree, and then I took my postgraduate degree in applied math, and then I got to know statistics and actuarial science. And then at some point, I realized there was an authority that had to do it's close to I think it's close to the American system. So you have independent authorities, organizations which are semi-public, but they make sure that politicians cannot touch them as regards the technical work.
Hmm.
So there was this public service, and I was very interested in it. And then I got into studying the actuarial exams in the beginning in the Greek Association, and one thing led to another. But I think it was not just one thing that brought me to the profession. It also I never started as your typical actuarial worker, like let's say like employee. What I did is I always consulted a little bit because my line of work demands that you consult politicians about pension reforms. And it was very funny because again, when I started working, they wouldn't listen. It was before the Greek debt crisis, and
Hmm.
everybody was very serious about making reforms on pensions. So they said, "We won't change anything. Don't talk to us about money and the pension reform. We got it under control." Of course, they didn't. And then in 2009, everything changed because we had a very serious problem with pensions. And the Greek debt crisis, unlike other debt crises that we had in the world, was not a banking crisis. It was a pension crisis.
Interesting.
So I immediately, let's say, I met the profession and I met consulting, and I just liked it so much. The combination really, really got to me. So
Well,
I
I think what's interesting about that, like, unlike other people that even in a consulting role, yours was almost in a public policy role. There's obviously a consulting bent to that, right? But you got in on the ground floor of public policy and pensions and the actuarial framework in dealing with the Greek pension system. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly. And the funniest part is that I had, going back 20 years, I think I had no sense of danger because I went up to the politicians, and my role allowed me to do so. And I was very keen to discuss numbers, which they didn't want to hear. So they didn't want to listen to that. So, but I kept talking. I kept talking, and at the end of the day, what happened was that after the debt crisis, and there's a lot to say about this, they started listening because the whole world had turned against Greece,
Mhm.
and people were very much skeptical about what we were doing with our pension money. Foreigners showed a lot of interest in it. I mean, I have been invited to talk to the China Aging Forum because of my work in Greece. So you can realize you realize it's an international thing, and they started listening. So again, not very willingly, but they did.
So let me make sure I'm getting this straight too. So the Hellenic Actuarial Authority, who you work for, that's like a quasi-governmental agency then. So it's part of the government structure, but it's walled off from direct control from politicians.
Yes, this is
And
exactly the case.
interesting. How many people work at the Hellenic Actuarial Authority?
Well, on average, 5 to 10 actuaries at a time. We should have more, but we don't.
And all focused on pensions and retirement, or does it get into other aspects of healthcare or insurance?
Well, we're focused on healthcare, sorry, on pensions. We should have, a part of us should be dealing with healthcare, but we don't have enough people. And more than 10 years ago, we are also in charge of the insurance sector. But this changed and it moved to another like kind of authority.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's separated now, and we're just dealing with pensions and pension reforms and social security economics.
Hmm, hmm. So talk to us a little bit about just working as an actuary in Greece. Obviously, you've got your experience there at the Hellenic Actuarial Authority, but when you look at the profession within Greece, like what do you see? What are people doing?
Well, most of the people we studied with, they go to like insurance companies, they become chief actuaries, they join the board, they do that kind of stuff. Um, Being what we call, I've heard it being said again, I don't know how it works in different countries, like a social security actuary,
Hmm.
entails another type of skill set. But for me, it's also the fact that I have worked doing, I also do work with people or companies or confederations of employees in Greece or in other countries. So the whole mentality of the actuarial profession in Greece is insurance oriented, and it's a very small proportion, like a few people, a few of us that do other things.
Hmm. Interesting. No, I appreciate that you brought up the international piece. You talked about that with the speaking engagement you had in China. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about some of the international lessons learned from the Greek pension system. You mentioned that that's obviously been a big part of your career to date. What things have come out of your experience working with the Greek pension system?
So yes, it's been a big school for me, and at the same time, it's been a great opportunity because see, in Greece we have the saying that when you go to the army, you evolve very slowly, but if there's war, you can evolve very quickly. So we had war in the pension system in Greece, and that's why I became a board member of the authority so quickly, even though I was young. And they asked me to go to the World Bank and speak, to the Caribbean Association, to China, to many, many places in the world. And why did they do that? Because the international lessons learned had to do with how Greeks managed the money from their pensions. And people might think that they managed them in a bad way, which is not true. They managed them in the worst way possible. They were afraid to invest the money
Ah.
because politics were in such a turmoil since 1960s or 70s to the 2000s. Governments would swift from one another. So the ones that left then were accused by the ones who came in. And the people in charge of the money thought it's a good idea not to invest them because then the other people will come and they say, like did something with the money, I illegally invested
They
it
didn't
and
want to
so on.
be, yeah, they didn't want to be accused of doing any wrongdoing with the
Yeah,
funds.
embezzlement and
Yeah.
so on. So another thing was that we had very, very high replacement rates, which were not according to the demographics that we followed in Greece. And this also became a problem in the late 80s for Greece, earlier than other countries, mind you. Italy tackled the problem at some point in the 90s, and then they had the same problem in 2018 or so. But we never had an actual pension reform. And the most interesting thing was the perception that people had, which was being siphoned into the politics system. So the politicians were elected, and if anyone would speak of a pension reform that reduced pensions, for example, or that increased contributions, they would vanish. They would like just vanish. Nobody would vote for them anymore, and the
Hmm.
political party they belonged to, they would like put them on the side, which was, I mean, if you think about it, it was tragic. And it was the norm, nevertheless. And these all changed after 2009 or 10, where we had this committee of people from the ECB, the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the International Monetary Fund. And these guys came to Greece, and in a very short time, they learned how the system worked better than the people who actually, you know,
Running
calculated
the day to day.
pensions.
Yeah, yeah.
And because they'd seen a lot of things, and they knew where to look, right?
Hmm.
And this was a life-changing period for me. And it also led to my PhD, which, as you probably know or have heard, many people who are into the actuarial profession think that it's not a norm to have a PhD, and most of them tell you, why do it? But what I realized especially when the IMF people came there, and I was bilingual, so I was inside these discussions. Otherwise, probably they were more political than my level at that point. But what happened was that the economists were asking for back of the envelope calculations, and the actuaries wanted to tell them exactly what the model included in each and every aspect of it. So there was a clash, and the discussions kept going. And then it struck me that economists and actuaries need someone to translate what each one says to another. And that's why my PhD, a few years after, I decided that I'll do on both economics and long-term modeling of pension projections. And then I brought these things together, and this gave me a whole new aspect of I mean, inside my work, but it also helped me understand the people from international institutions and the way the international institutions go to countries and ask for data and manage to realize how economics change in a place in such a short period of time.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's fascinating. And so kind of opportunistic in terms of how things came together for you and led you down this path, which is most people, right? I mean, probably not something that you were thinking, oh, this is my career trajectory. This is where I see it going. And it's more of a function of circumstance and situations that you found yourself in that led you down the path that you're on.
Oh,
Oh,
exactly.
oh, and it sounds like you've had some really awesome experiences too, especially being able to interact with people from the IMF, from the ECB. I'm sure that not only broadened your network, um, but also gave you some additional, allowed you to develop or utilize different skill sets than you might as just a standalone actuary.
Yeah. Coming from a small country, and one of the main problems you get is the same problem you get if you come from a small village anywhere in the world and you haven't been around too much. It's like The Village, the thriller, the horror movie.
Hmm.
So it's you think something is the norm until you realize it's not.
Hmm.
So, as a rude awakening, for example, in disability was when, again, the Troika told us that, you have a very high rate of disability. And I said to myself, are they crazy? My initial response was so foolish because I thought to myself, like, so what do you want to do? Like, put legs on people that don't have, or bring people back from the dead? What do you want to do? And then I went home that night and I said, so they say disability is like 16% in Greece, and abroad it's like 6 or 8% in the average European state. And I just, I had this moment of enlightenment that, it's not real disability, which they knew all along. So there were certain places in Greece where politicians, along with certain people, had, been brought together to create things that looked like the people were disabled, but they were not. And again, this was an international lesson for us as Greeks in general, and then for me in particular. And some of the people, like me, were against it. Some of the people were against change, as they always are. And well, I think change prevailed
Yeah.
in this certain
Oh, no, I
situation.
think that's really interesting. In fact, I jotted down one of the things you said, and I really like it. You know, you think something is the norm until it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that that probably describes a lot of actuarial work. It describes a lot of consulting work for sure. Uh, and really, I think causes people to have to reevaluate the assumptions that they make, or at least question them from time to time to say, is this really what's happening? Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing with my PhD, where I had my professor was an economist, and we would
Mhm.
fight. I mean, like politely fight over things all the time. And then I said, it's like we will run this valuation with 2% inflation, and you would say, but why? And then you realize that you're doing a PhD. He said, but why? I
Yeah.
want you to like talk to me and write a whole chapter on why 2% is the inflation. Otherwise, it's not like a calculated guess or it's
Yeah.
a prudent assumption. There's no such thing. You have to prove to me that 2% is prudent.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think that's great. Yeah, that's a good it's a good point in our conversation to switch gears a little bit because we've been talking about a lot of what you've been talking about, I think, has brought out how you're working as a consultant within the Greek government through the actuarial authority there, let alone some of the research that you're doing at the university level. But that leads us really in. It's a good segue into talking about IACA, the International Association of Consulting Actuaries. For people that might not be familiar with IACA, talk to us a little bit about it. Why does the organization exist?
Okay, so originally founded in the previous century with more than 50 years of history now, the International Association of Consulting Actuaries was an independent association of actuaries that had to do only with consulting. After a while, people decided it could be a section of the IAA, the International Actuarial Association, which made sense for a lot of reasons. And it brings together people like you and me who are into consulting, and it helps them with the skill set that other kinds of actuaries don't need. So you will see, and you will have met a lot of good actuaries and very talented actuaries that are really good at doing their work, which might be pricing, might be, like property casualty and so on and so forth. But if you're a consulting actuary, you have more work to do. You really need to know your law. You really need to be able to sell your work. You have to talk about your work. And we all know the jokes about introvert and extrovert actuaries. So selling is not something actuaries can do easily. By nature, they're people that are better with numbers, but not very good with people. And when I say not good with people, I mean not good at expressing themselves. They might be polite and easygoing if you get them at the right time, but they're not very good at expressing what their needs are, for example. So there are aspects of the actuarial profession to that are different as regards consultants. Then you have to be able to deal with people, managing people, which is also hard. And it's sometimes it takes more of your time than you would expect it to. So all of these aspects of the profession that have to do with consultants that are not there in other types of actuaries, we try we try to bring together people who are discussing these. The first steps when you open up a small consultancy, what do you do when you grow a lot? How do you sell and go home or get your pension? What do you do with people that have evolved inside your consultancy and are too good or too expensive to keep anymore? We have had very nice discussions, very nice webinars and in-person meetings that where we have people with decades of experience on these subjects and they share it with us. It's invaluable. So
Well, I
this is
think
more or less what the IACA does.
yeah, no, and I love how you said that too. It spurred some thoughts that I jotted down here. I'll go back to something you said when we were talking about just your day job and with the Hellenic Actuarial Authority that in some ways, a consultant is very much like an interpreter. It's
Hmm.
can you take that core actuarial technical knowledge and results, and can you relay that complex information in a way that others can understand and make informed decisions? And because a lot of times those end users of that actuarial product are not actuaries. They might be economists, they might be other government or public policy officials that are going to have to put forward proposals or advocate for a certain course of action based on actuarial results that they don't necessarily understand all the ins and outs and technical details, but they need to at least be able to understand them in a way that they can do their job as well.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and I like what you said too, like how IACA just brings together those like-minded consultants from across the globe and allows people to get exposure and experience to what other people are doing and how they are doing it. How are they taking that complex information and distilling it down so that people can make informed decisions. It actually reminds me of one of the sessions. So you and I were in Sao Paulo back in May for the joint colloquium between the IAA sections. And I remember sitting in a session from some of our friends from the Caribbean Actuarial Association talking about some of the problems that they were tackling from an actuarial perspective that had public policy
Mhm.
implications and how they would take those results and distill them down in a way that those public policy makers could understand what was going on and make good informed decisions because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And, especially with pensions, since I work mainly with pensions, it's always a political issue. Whatever you say, it's political. Even if it comes from an actuary, you always have to bear in mind that in the right ears, it can be a very good article against the government, where I work, for example. And I think around the globe, if you talk about pension reforms, increasing pension statutory ages for retirement, if you increase or decrease any any part of it to be to
And
coin
any
funds.
change, right? Yeah, any
Yes, any
change to
change is
those.
political. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, and you're right. It is a different skill set, right? And so I like, and I've experienced this too with IACA and being able to just see how other people deal with those types of situations around the world. So most people might not understand maybe the structure of the International Actuarial Association. The IAA in and of itself it is an association of associations. So right, you don't as an individual, you don't belong to the IAA. You might belong to an association that belongs to the IAA. So for example, here in the US, I belong to the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, which is a full member association of the IAA. So I've got my affiliation that way. But the sections are different, right? The sections are not association driven from their membership. They're actually individual uh, driven organizations. So an individual can actually become a member of IACA. So for someone that might be considering or questioning, hey, should I become a part of IACA? What would you tell them? What's the benefits of being a member of IACA?
I think that the most important aspect of being a part of the section and an association of that kind is the the chance you have to talk to people about questions, problems, second thoughts, how you deal with something in your line of work, to get to understand how people do things that you do in a different way or you can't do. The idea is to bring people together whose minds work alike, but at some times everybody gets a challenge, and this challenge has to be tackled. So besides the fact that we have webinars for our members and we get together and they can fill in their CPD requirements and everything, these are important things, but they're secondary when it comes to talking to people in the first person when we meet together. And I've gained so much, and this includes you, Michael. A few months ago, we were sitting together around the table having dinner, and it includes everyone I've ever been with. We sit down from the early morning during breakfast until late at night, and we exchange views and we talk about things. And suddenly, when you talk to somebody, you say, "Oh my God, I didn't know that. I could have done it so much easier." Or, it's like this also happens to you, and I didn't know it only, I thought it only happens to me. And there are also people who like talking about their problems because not everyone likes talking about their problems, but we all have some during our everyday life. And the more you talk to people, the more you realize that we're not alone. The more you realize that simple, everyday solutions can be found, and the more you realize that there are people out there that can help you by mentoring, cooperating. We have people in our boards who now work together. I work together in Portugal with a person from our board. I do some work in Portugal at the time, and actually in the last few years. So it's really important that people get together and they form a club, which in this case is the Consulting Association Club. That's
Yeah,
the
well,
reason.
yeah, no, I like that. And for those that belong to the Conference of Consulting Actuaries in the US, this is just another forum to expand your network of consultants around the globe. And like you said, there's different perspectives, different viewpoints that are invaluable as one is progressing through their career. I think you laid that out beautifully. Um, we've made reference to the joint colloquiums that the association's been a part of, most recently in Sao Paulo in May of 2025.
Mhm.
For actuaries that want to be involved or want to discover what these colloquium have to offer, what type of submissions are considered? And when we think about what's coming up in the coming years, like where are future colloquium scheduled for?
So the upcoming event, which is a great one, is in Tokyo in 2026. It's the International Congress of Actuaries. I have been attending these for some years. There was one that was delayed a year because of COVID, and then we had it in 2023 in Sydney. It was fantastic, almost 1,500 people from all walks of life. Again, the discussions were so, I could hardly go to sleep in Sydney because I kept talking to people and enjoying it so much and attending all these presentations and everything. So 3 years after, every 3 years, we've decided we have the ICA now. We have the ICA in Tokyo. The call for papers is open already. The consulting section does accept papers from you. We want them to be a bit more practical than your ordinary how should I call it, university type paper. So if you don't want to have a paper which is like 100% ready for a journal, it's still okay. If you want to describe a practical problem or a practical solution for consultancies, we'd be very happy to hear about it. You can also submit for a presentation without a paper, which is also a very good way to go. And the event itself, it is taking place in November 2026 in Tokyo. There's a
Yeah,
lot more information. We could probably put the link under the
yeah, it's
interview when it's out.
Yep. Yeah, and it's easy to find too, even if you go to the IAA's homepage, which is
Hmm.
actuaries.org. You can find that under the International Actuarial Association's homepage. But I think it's important too, because some of this is nomenclature, right? In the US, we go to conferences, we don't call them colloquium, but a colloquium is essentially a conference. And when we talk about submissions for papers, I think you articulated that really well. We're not talking about, like, you don't have to do a research paper and submit that as part of the colloquium. It can just be, hey, here's an idea of a session that I think would be useful. Here's the title, here's a draft description, here's what we would cover. You give basically an abstract of what you're going to do. And then if it gets accepted, you can pull together that presentation and then have an opportunity to deliver it in front of an international audience. So I've done that myself. I think it's a fun exercise to go through. Most recently, I mentioned it in the colloquium in Sao Paulo. There was a group of us that came together and put together a presentation on sustainability and ESG, and that was a lot of fun to be a part of. So yeah, highly encourage people to look at that. So we talked about the ICA in Tokyo. After that, I think there's another colloquium scheduled for 2027, if I remember right.
Yeah, probably in Luxembourg. We're actually in the works for that. And something else we should tell people is that these colloquia happen at a different place on the planet every time. So if you come from the US and you cannot travel to Europe, you can ask for bursaries if you have a nice paper to present, and we will think about it. Or vice versa, if you come from Europe and want to go to the US, there is a colloquium that's taking place near you at some point in time every 2 or 3 years. So now it was like South America, next it's Tokyo, which is Asia, and next it will be Europe in Luxembourg. So we try to cover the whole area, and it's easier that way for people to move around, and it's the right thing to do because the IAA is an international organization and its sections are too. So we try to divide the planet into five or six main areas and try to be everywhere.
No, which is great. And again, it gives people an opportunity to get to know other people from around the globe. I mean, I think similar to the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, that networking component is extremely valuable for all the reasons that you've articulated in our discussion today as well. I mentioned in your bio, you're part of the strategic planning committee of the IAA. I'd love for you to tell people for just a little bit about your involvement in the IAA so far. How would you describe the organization as you sit on that strategic planning committee, which has a real interesting place within the IAA? It's really around helping the IAA decide how to move forward as an organization. I'd love for you to share with people your thoughts on the IAA and the direction that it's going.
Well, the thing is, I can't say much about the strategic planning committee, to be honest. But what I can say is that I represent the Portuguese Association in that, because I'm also a member of the Portuguese Association, and the people there have asked me to step in. I travel to all the IAA events under my role as the IACA chair as well. So I have a dual role, let's call it, in these meetings. The idea is that there are 2 or 3 main groups right now which have taken on the task of questioning the IAA's existence into the future. So strategic planning would mean what do we want to do next? And how do we coordinate all the different groups that are working within the IAA? And there are a lot. In the IAA, we have to say this, is a very complex organization for people who are looking onto the website, and at some point they're frustrated and they say, oh my God, what are these guys doing there? And some of them might also want to come to us and say, I want to spend some time volunteering, and I'm sure we'll go into volunteering after. But if you're frustrated with the IAA, we are too. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of politics, and it's a big organization, and you have a lot of things that need to be tackled there. So we have separate groups. We have the advanced committee, and then we have the strategic planning committee and the executive committee. And what we do in the strategic planning, we try to see where we want to go, the next day, the next year, the next decade. And it's not a coincidence that the chair of the strategic planning committee is the immediate past chair of the IAA. So that would be Charles Cowling at this point in time, because it's important that someone knows how the organization works and they help it move forward. So if I could just say a few words about the SPC, that would be it.
No, that's great. I think that's helpful, because I think one of the things that, especially from a US perspective, where we've got a very well-developed actuarial system between organizations like the CCA, the Society of Actuaries, the Casualty Actuarial Society, the American Academy of Actuaries, in and of itself, it's fairly self-contained, even though some of those organizations have some additional reach outside of the US. And I think we take it for granted that in other places in the world, there's actually a fairly heavy reliance on the IAA when it comes to things like standards of practice, and how do they adopt those into those local associations. And the IAA really serves as a great resource, not only from actuarial standards, but also relationships with some of these the big organizations, the OECD, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, where they've got these strategic relationships that can benefit the profession on a global basis.
Exactly. And we work together with the organizations to better and to enhance our connections, and to maybe produce texts or guidelines that will further help both the IAA and the practices of the actuaries and the other organizations as well, because what we do is important, but not many people understand what we do.
Mhm. Yeah, no, exactly. Well, that actually is a good segue into the last bit that I want to talk about with you here today, George, and that is leadership. We mentioned this is our leadership development podcast. When you think about people that you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have? How do they demonstrate their leadership?
Okay. So I'm always skeptical about answering these type of questions because I tend to think that each and every one of us has a couple of points that are important, maybe also based on what they've been through. And you take this tiny substrato information and you apply it to the whole, like to the whole idea of the person who's capable of doing things, and they're the leaders that you would like to have in a way. I don't know if I'm putting this correctly. So I'm going to go through two or three things that I consider are important. And I'm sure these are just for me. Probably everyone has their own. So um, I think it's important to listen and reflect. So if someone wants to lead, the most they can do is listen, and then they would need to speak just a few words in order for things to move forward. And if they're well respected and if they have established their position, they don't need to talk a lot and they don't need to raise their voices because people know that they're no they know where they're going. And this is another point I want to raise. It's like people are working mad frantically these days, but sometimes they don't know where they're going. It is really important that we have a goal and we communicate this goal to a group of people that we lead, and then take them by the hand and get to doing what we want to do all together. Transcend any boundaries that we need to transcend. Make sure we don't fall in the trap of perfectionism, which is also a big and important problem of these days. I mean, of this period of time we're living in, especially with social media. Our bodies, our minds, we need to know everything. We should have known this because someone said it on TikTok. We need to be very super healthy because everyone says so, and we know how to be healthy. We might know a lot of things, and we have our hands-on information on a lot of things, and we want to do the best thing possible in our work. And actuaries, I was discussing this with a professor from, it's Tom Curran. He's a professor in LSE, psychology professor, and he talks about perfectionism, and I read his book. It is a very good book, and it very well describes how some people, and I think actuaries are involved, fall ill to this trap and they want to do everything perfect at some point, and you cannot do this. You end up destroying yourself, and the worst part is you end up destroying the team that has so willingly followed you into the trap. So if I had a few things to say, I believe these would be them, and I'm leaving for last, maybe the most important. Um, I think they need to be full as people. There is this very famous saying by the Apple guy. What's his name?
Steve Jobs or
Yes,
Tim
yeah,
Cook?
Steve
Yeah,
Jobs.
yeah.
He said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," right?
Mhm.
But when it comes to leaders, I've seen a lot of things which I don't like, and I think somebody has got to be full. And what do I mean by full? I mean, he might have his own like need to evolve and the enthusiasm and the passion, but he has got, and I'm referring to a he because I'm thinking of myself, obviously, but they have to be very full. They have to be happy, and they have to have things in their lives that make them happy. Because I think I've seen people pretending to be leaders, and they're trying to find through their work stream what they're missing everywhere else in their life. And this is why I make it a very important issue for me to be to have this balance between work and life. Because sometimes we get away and then we drag everyone else into a very, very bad series of events. So we have to be happy with our lives to a normal extent. We don't like, we don't we just smiling and laughing all day. We have to have done things in our lives which we really wanted, like if it's traveling, if it's family, if it's solitude, I don't know what you like. Just do it. If you want to lead, you will have, in my eyes, you need to have gone through some stages which fulfill you, and then you can lead. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. And this
I
is out of experience.
Yeah, no, I really love that. In fact, I was jotting down some notes as you were talking, and originally I was saying, oh, I probably summarized this as saying, oh, you need to be well-rounded, but I crossed that out. I said, no, that's not what you mean. What you're talking about there is you have to live a full life. It can't just be yourself. You shouldn't define yourself just by what you do for work, right? There have to be other elements that contribute to your overall happiness. And I love that because I think when you look at people who are successful leaders, when you look at what they do, work is a part of them, but it doesn't define them in their entirety, right?
Exactly. And you see, most of the times you cannot tell until it's like paintings and dead people. They have to die before the paintings like are really out there. So you can't tell until they leave the leadership position, and then you're sure if they were good leaders or not. And I have an example. Can I mention one
Please
example?
do. Yeah.
I'm sure you like the guy a lot. I've seen you talking about him. It's Tom Terry, right?
Hmm.
So I met Tom back in 2014, and I sat next to him having dinner in Washington, D.C., and he talked to me. And I wasn't so enthusiastic because I was a nobody for him, like to talk to. But we had a really meaningful conversation. And he said one thing I always remember talking about, like the age threshold for retirement. And he said, George, who are we to tell people when they have to stop working? Which I thought was very good.
Hmm.
And down the line, he became the IAA president, and we still talk and we still cooperated. And then he stopped being the IAA president, and he still comes to meetings, and it's still Tom. The leadership positions, even though he did very, very good job with all these positions, they didn't affect him at all. It's still Tom. Okay. So I was in Sao Paulo the other day talking to the SPC, and he was like across the room. I say, and Tom. And it's like he's the same guy. He's the same guy getting better and better and better. But what you know him by is not that IAA president, or was he SOA president as well? Or
He's been a president of a few of the organizations, including the Conference of Consulting Actuaries.
okay,
And yeah,
CCA
yeah.
probably. So, and it's like you remember him because he's Tom, and he's such a strong character. He doesn't need the title for you to remember him by.
Interesting. Yeah, I know. I love that. It's not the title that defines somebody as a leader, but it's who they are. It's their persona, right?
Exactly.
No, I think that's good. Any other role models that come to mind when you think about leadership and how you've tried to emulate their examples?
Well, I wouldn't like to talk about many people. I'll just mention maybe one more person. She actually is the godmother of my son. And she was one of the first people I ever worked with. And she was, before that, she was a teacher to me. So her name is Anastasia. She comes from Greece originally, and she studied in the States. And she would teach me English when I was little. And then when I grew up, we kept, like talking to each other, and I would work with her on some projects. And she never expanded too much. She kept her like English school, because English schools in Greece are a norm. I mean, everybody goes to English school in the afternoon, and she was always very determined. And I was always I always look up to her because she went through many difficulties in her life, but she managed to stand up and she managed to overcome them, and she managed to go back to the original place where she wanted to be, teaching English into the classroom. And she's like 65 maybe now, and she still does it. And what I see in her is the determination of the person that loves their work and also loves a challenge. And they keep this challenge up to the point that they really like and enjoy life. Because you also have to put boundaries around yourself. And you also have to not let perfectionism affect you. And this is what I really like about her.
Oh, that's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, the determination of someone who loves what they do is a great leadership quality to have. Um, look, thinking about the actuarial profession, what do you view, George, as the imperatives for future successful leaders within the profession?
Oh my God, I don't know, maybe being a machine. It's really hard to say, to be honest. It's all the important numerical aspects of the profession are slowly but surely being taken care of by machines and AI and
It's
everything.
easier, right? It's a lot easier than how things were done 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Exactly, exactly. And we had this paper we wrote with a professor from the University of the Aegean back in, we submitted in Brussels in 2024, was it? And for the first time, we looked into pensions and how to use networks in order to calculate pension return rates. So replacement rates, sorry. So I understood then that the profession is taking a big change as far as my part is concerned as well, because everybody sees it in their own, like a line of work. It's easier to notice the difference. But I know that this happens across everywhere, and mainly I think it's mainly in property and casualty. I see people producing many models there and coming up with a lot of ideas, and it's only natural that they do. So I'd say that fine-tuning all these models, being able to cross-check the results, setting up and keeping these models in line with the current uh, legislation that comes out from either the European or the American institutions and so on should be a key factor for actuaries who are really staying in the game. I wouldn't know how the profession will change in the next 5 or 10 years. I would expect to see a big overlap with data science, which is also a big problem for actuaries nowadays because at university you have we have two tracks in one of the postgraduate um, I I can't think of the word postgraduate
Programs or
programs,
yeah.
sorry, yeah, postgraduate programs they teach. So most of the people choose data science because they think calculating pensions in the Etkin book, is so hard, right? So doing pension valuations is hard indeed. And they think data science is easier. It might not be easier. It might be more fancy or have better marketing. And it's not that actuaries do market their work a lot, or even the way they learn and the module they teach and everything. But the reality is that we are going to see some overlap with other sciences, and I consider this to be a good thing, and we expect it. But I really wouldn't know how it will evolve. It all depends, I think, on how quickly the AI will evolve and will absorb all these numerical part of the profession.
Which I think goes back to some of the other qualities and things that you've listed, like the fact that as a consultant, right, being an interpreter, being able to help somebody understand the output from a complex model and what went into it and what it produced and what does it mean and what does somebody do with it. I think I'll go back to that description that you said earlier is maybe one way to sum up with all the uncertainty that's potentially out there on the horizon. Like, what skill would you need? You need to learn how to be able to interpret that and make it so that other people can utilize it.
That's true, and that's a very good point that you're making now, Michael. But it's you know if you want to be a good interpreter, you also have to be, I mean, you have to keep acquiring skills
Mhm.
because we don't know which language you will be interpreting from, to be honest. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
but
and yeah, and frankly, that language might not even exist yet, for all we know, right? Yeah.
exactly.
No, well, this has been great. This has been I knew this would be a good, interesting discussion, just based on our friendship over the years, and some of the things that I jotted down that I'm taking away. I really like the phrase, you think something is the norm until it's not. I think that's a great anecdote there for especially questioning the assumptions that go into our actuarial work product. We talked about how a consultant really is an interpreter, and then your thoughts on leadership, about how everyone has elements of leadership within them, and things that you thought are important, think are important, that I really agree with, the ability to listen, reflect, provide vision, avoid that perfectionism complex, and really living a full life, having a determination to do what you love, and whether that's in the actuarial space or something else, right? So,
It's been a real pleasure, Mike, and I'm Michael, and I'm telling you, it's like when I knew we were having this conversation, I knew it was going to go well myself because I've heard you talking to other people. You always have so many nice things to say, and you come up with so many nice ideas about discussions. And the rest of the, I would ask people to go out and have a look at the rest of the of the videos on YouTube as well, because I've heard a lot of nice things on these discussions.
well, and some of the people that you've mentioned, Tom Terry being one of them, has been a guest on the podcast before. We had a
Yeah.
great conversation. All of those can be found out there on the CCA website. So I do want to thank my guest today, George Symeonidis. George, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out and do that?
I say if you don't know me and if you've never met me, you can go on LinkedIn and just jot down my name. You will immediately find me and I'll add you. I'll be happy to. If you do know me, you probably have my email from some of my papers or for my business card. That's a way as well. And I'll be happy to connect to people, especially in the actuarial profession, but all related sciences because lawyers are needed, you know, economists are needed. So if you want to reach out to me, I'll be happy to talk to you.
No, that's great. And join IACA, right? That's a great way to associate with you if you somebody goes out and wants to join IACA.
Definitely.
It's a nominal
Definitely.
cost for most people, and that's a great way to stay connected. I want to again thank my guest today, George. And in addition, I want to encourage people to please subscribe and like this podcast to help us share stories like George's that can help benefit the actuarial community. The CCA's leadership development community is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join. You don't have to be a member of the CCA to be a part of that. I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping to produce today's event. Join us for upcoming CCA events and follow us online on social media and on our website. With that, George, thanks, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.